You walk into a restaurant, maybe on a first date, maybe just trying to eat soup on a Tuesday, and the host points you toward a table floating in the middle of the room. Open on all sides, nowhere to lean back, strangers close enough to hear your spoon, and your body rejects it before you can turn that feeling into words. Nothing is wrong. Nobody is hunting you. The soup place does not need a threat plan. Still, your eyes are already hunting for the back booth with the wall behind it and the door in view. Most people who feel this pull end up taking that booth, or they quietly rotate their chair until the entrance stays visible. If someone else gets the wall seat first, the meal picks up a small irritation you cannot explain without sounding a little intense. This is not only a personality quirk, and it is not simply anxiety, though anxiety can absolutely make it louder. What you are feeling is old human code, roughly 2 million years old, still running every time you enter a room. That is the part that makes it strange. The danger changed, the buildings changed, and the furniture got nicer, but the old program kept doing its job. After this, you will notice your own seating choices differently. You will also start noticing who else in the room is doing the same thing. To understand it, you have to leave the restaurant and go back about 150,000 years. Imagine a hominin close enough to us that, if you saw one in a bus station, you might assume they were simply having a brutal month. Life happens in a group because the group is survival. Alone on the African savanna, you are easy prey. Together, your odds improve, which is about as cheerful as the math gets. Every day, the nervous system runs a calculation that the conscious mind never needs to narrate. Danger is not only what stands in front of you. Danger is also where something could appear from next. Predators do not announce themselves, and rival human bands did not send polite warnings. The direction behind you matters most when it becomes the direction you forgot to watch. The bodies that survived kept choosing the same kind of position. They put something solid behind them and kept their eyes pointed toward the likeliest path of danger. A rock face, a cliff wall, the back of a shallow cave, or the edge of a fire became more than background. Even a fraction of a second mattered when the alternative was a leopard with perfect timing. Around the fire, which is basically the first restaurant setting humans ever had, the best seat belonged to the person who could see trouble first. Here's the useful reversal. People who feel a real physical need to face the door in a modern restaurant are not broken, and they are not automatically anxious in some clinical way. They are running a sensitive version of one of the oldest threat monitoring systems humans carried forward. Their brain is doing what it was shaped to do, just in the wrong century. In the older environment, those were exactly the people you wanted near the edge of the fire. The whole problem is almost embarrassingly simple. The environment changed, but the software did not. The mechanism starts with the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe. People describe it as an alarm system, a threat detector, or a panic button, and all of those phrases flatten it a bit, but they point in the right direction. Its job is surveillance. It scans for anything that resembles danger, and entrances get special treatment. Neuroscientist Joseph LeDoux spent decades mapping the fear circuitry of the brain. His work showed that the amygdala can process threat signals before the reasoning parts of the brain fully catch up. Sensory information can move along a fast route, often called the low road, from the eyes and ears toward the amygdala, in something like 12 milliseconds. The slower route, the high road, passes through the cortex and takes roughly 25 milliseconds longer, which sounds tiny until the difference is reacting instead of thinking. That is why a thrown object can make you flinch before you consciously understand what moved. It is also why sitting with your back to a busy room can feel wrong without giving you a clean explanation. The amygdala has already done the spatial math and marked the position as exposed. Your cortex receives that alert as unease, a little bodily static, a quiet sense that the chair is wrong. What this circuitry keeps watching is approach. Movement toward you from outside your field of view matters more than movement you can already see. A doorway becomes an unresolved variable because it can produce a person at any speed, from any direction, at any time. Put that doorway behind you, and anything entering the room begins in your blind spot. To old threat circuitry, that is not a seating preference. That is bad positioning. There is a name for this, and once you learn it, rooms start looking different. In 1975, the geographer J. Appleton published prospect-refuge theory to explain why some spaces feel satisfying while others feel quietly unbearable even when nothing is visibly wrong. Prospect means you can survey the space. Refuge means you have cover, concealment, and something solid behind you. The nervous system wants both. Visibility alone does not settle it, and cover alone does not either. A corner booth gives you the full deal with the wall behind you and the entrance in sight. A table in the middle of the restaurant might face the door and still feel wrong because it offers prospect without refuge. The corner booth works because both old systems finally quiet down together. Researchers have watched this happen in actual rooms, not only in theory. Robert Sommer, the psychologist who helped build the modern study of personal space in 1959, spent years observing bars, cafeterias, and libraries to see where people chose to sit. Again and again, people moved toward anchored seats, backed by walls, partitions, or some other solid boundary. Open seats in exposed areas lost out, even when they were closer or easier. Sommer called protective, backed arrangements sociopetal, meaning spaces that draw people together and settle them. Exposed, high-traffic arrangements became sociofugal, spaces that put people slightly on edge and push them apart. In 2019, a Frontiers in Psychology study placed real people in an actual crowded cafe and tracked their seat choices under real conditions. Anchoring, meaning something solid at the back, came out as one of the strongest predictors right alongside exposure to eye contact. Another analysis built from Appleton's framework found that spatial control, or how enclosed and defensible a seat felt, explained a large share of room use, with back chairs drawing more occupancy than open bench seating. People are not walking into restaurants and consciously running this formula. Bodies choose the wall first, and the mind catches up later. The same low-level alert you feel inside can be measured from the outside. If this sounds paranoid, cats make the whole thing easier to see. Give a cat access to a new room and it will spend an almost embarrassing amount of time finding the highest available vantage point with a clear view of entry and exit points. That is not panic, that is comfort. A cat sitting on top of the refrigerator staring down at the kitchen door like a tiny security consultant is doing a version of what you do at the restaurant. Big cats do the grander version. Lions that are not actively hunting often rest in elevated positions with clean sight lines, even though they are apex predators and nothing is really hunting them. The circuitry that says, get to high ground and monitor the opening, does not require constant danger to keep running. Leaving the system on costs less than turning it off and being wrong once. Group living animals bring the same logic into social roles. Behavioral ecologists studying cooperative species, such as meerkats, dwarf mongooses, and Arabian babblers, have found that dominant individuals take sentinel duty more often than subordinates. They climb to raised, exposed posts, watch while others forage, and choose the higher, better vantage points when they do it. That does not mean the dominant animal is more anxious. Guarding the group from the best sightline functions as a privilege of rank. Humans do not place literal sentries at brunch. Still, the pull toward watching without being watched did not disappear just because the threats got smaller. It keeps moving through public spaces in a quieter form, giving ordinary rooms a faint trace of sentinel duty with almost nothing left to guard against. Archaeology cannot hand us a fossilized seating preference, which is annoying but fair. What it can show is how ancient humans used shelter and what those choices suggest. Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa contains one of the longest continuous records of hominin occupation on Earth, reaching close to 2 million years. It also holds some of the earliest known evidence of controlled fire use inside a cave. Researchers describe Wonderwerk across much of that occupation as a protected part of the terrain. Hominins returned to it, sheltered in it, and effectively defended it rather than treating it like a random hole in stone. That is the refuge half of the equation, sitting in the ground almost 2 million years deep. Picture the mouth of the cave, stone behind you, the outside world in front of you. 200,000 years of human updates later, the same posture shows up at the back of a restaurant, with drywall standing in for dolomite. History gives a much sharper example. On August 2, 1876, in Deadwood, Dakota Territory, James Butler Hickok, better known as Wild Bill Hickok, sat down at a poker table in a saloon. The only available seat left his back to the door. Some accounts say he asked to switch and was refused. Less than an hour later, a man came through the door behind him and shot him in the back of the head. Hickok's usual habit was documented by historians and biographers. In public spaces, he preferred to sit with his back to a wall, and he explained that choice as a survival strategy. The one day circumstance denied him that position, he died. You can call that tragic coincidence, or you can hear it as very dark supporting evidence, depending on how literally you want to take evolutionary psychology. Military doctrine arrived at the same lesson through practice. Combat positioning emphasizes covering your six, which means protecting the sector behind you, as a basic survival requirement. Operators do not need a lecture about ancient brain wiring to understand it. People who failed to protect the blind side historically often did not get another chance. The strongest objection is worth taking seriously. This could look like anxiety, learned behavior, or cultural conditioning from action movies where the calm, capable character always sits facing the door. A person could absorb the idea that careful people sit that way, then mistake the performance for instinct. That layer is real. Trauma survivors, combat veterans, and people with anxiety disorders often show the behavior more intensely, and cultural stories can give the habit a sharper identity. Movies did not invent the preference, but they can turn the dial up and hand it a costume. The deeper issue is timing, because the preference shows up before the cultural lesson fully arrives. Children who have never studied action movie seating still orient themselves so they can see who enters. Toddlers in developmental psychology settings have repeatedly been observed positioning themselves near walls during free play. Infants prioritize movement and especially faces entering their field of vision, which belongs to some of the most well-replicated research in developmental psychology. Culture gives the habit a story. The root is older, stranger, and already active before anyone calls it strategy. The social part gets even more revealing once you start watching groups. Not everyone fights for the back corner, and the person who gets the wall seat is not always chosen by accident. Think of group meals with an informal leader, a boss, a patriarch, a matriarch, or simply the person everyone quietly treats as in charge. Often enough to notice that person ends up with their back to the wall and a clean view of the room. The position is not only about safety, it also signals control. It says, I monitor this space and I do not have to argue for the privilege of doing it from here. Sommer's observations in cafeterias and common rooms found this kind of informal sorting again and again, with anchored, high-visibility seats clustering around people who already held informal authority. Nobody assigns those seats, the room quietly reorganizes around rank, and most people play along without noticing the choreography. The same underlying algorithm appears in the sentinel mongoose and the resting lion. It runs so automatically that you barely catch yourself doing it. You simply feel that the person in the back corner knows what they are doing. Here's the strange payoff. The threats your amygdala evolved to monitor are almost never present in the restaurant, the waiting room, or the coffee shop. The person who enters through the door is almost certainly another customer. During your soup, the chance of a meaningful threat is so low that tracking it makes little practical sense. Your brain cannot fully accept that. The amygdala never received the update. It still works from a world where the thing coming through the opening might be the last thing you ever saw. So it keeps running the surveillance loop, keeps marking exposed backs as a problem, and keeps pulling you toward the wall like a compass toward north. The mismatch is almost tender in how absurd it is. Natural selection built a sensitive early warning system, then modern life placed it inside restaurants where the old threat almost never arrives. It is like installing a seismic sensor network in an IKEA. The system works. The setting is the problem. Every flicker of discomfort with your back to a crowd, every neck turn toward the door, every quiet pull toward the corner booth, comes from that old adaptation doing what it was built to do. It is not a malfunction. It is 2 million years of survival logic looking for a job and finding a soup restaurant. People who feel it most intensely are not automatically more anxious in any pathological sense. In this narrow way, they may simply be more tuned. Their threat detection hardware has more sensitivity, and in the environment where that software was written, they were the person you wanted awake at the mouth of the cave. The whole group benefited from someone who noticed the opening first. The world changed faster than the brain could follow. Now you are a functioning apex primate with a working amygdala and a seating preference that survived 2 million years of change, 3 ice ages, agriculture, the Industrial Revolution, and the invention of the Cheesecake Factory. Still at the back wall, still facing the door. The cave just got central heating. If you recognized yourself immediately, you already know the seat you look for before anyone points it out. Put in the comments whether you know someone who can sit with their back to a crowded room and feel completely fine. Maybe they are calmer, or maybe their nervous system does not need the refuge half of the equation as badly. The answers tend to split along temperamental lines, and the pattern is fascinating. If you want more of this, the old machinery still running underneath modern life, the biological inheritance nobody asked for and nobody can fully opt out of, subscribe. This channel exists to make the strange mechanics of being human make sense. Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Back corner, facing the door, just like always.